They told me I was family, right before they stabbed me in the back. That's how I start every story now. Because people always assume betrayal comes from enemies. But mine came from the people who smiled in my face every morning, clinked coffee mugs with me in Monday meetings, and called me indispensable, until I wasn't. My name's Ethan Cole, 34, senior analyst at a mid-sized tech firm in Seattle called VectorPoint Systems. I wasn't flashy, but I was the guy who stayed late, cleaned up other people's messes, and made sure the presentations looked perfect before the executives showed up. I believed hard work meant loyalty would follow. Turns out, that's not how it works. At VectorPoint, loyalty was just a word they printed on the lobby wall in big silver letters. And no one embodied that lie better than Marcus Hale, our VP of Operations, and my mentor. The guy I used to call a friend. Marcus had this easy charm. Sharp suit, perfect teeth, the kind of confidence that made you want to follow him into a burning building. He was the first to notice me when I was just another face in the cubicle rows. Pulled me into high-level projects, dropped my name in board meetings, told me I had a future at the company. He'd clap a hand on my shoulder and say, "You're one of the good ones, Ethan. Don't ever forget that." I didn't. For 3 years, I poured everything into making him proud. Late nights, missed holidays, caffeine instead of sleep. And when the promotion for senior strategist opened up, Marcus was the one who encouraged me to apply. Said I deserved it. So when my name wasn't even on the shortlist, I thought there'd been a mistake. "Don't take it personally," Marcus said, voice calm, eyes steady. "You're too valuable where you are. You keep things running." Too valuable where I was. It sounded like a compliment, until it didn't. That night, as I stared at the glow of my monitor in the empty office, something in me shifted. A flicker of unease, like hearing a strange noise in your house and pretending it's nothing. Because behind the glass walls of the executive floor, I saw Marcus shaking hands with Dana, the new hire who did get the strategist role. She was smiling, thanking him. And when he leaned in to whisper something to her, they both laughed. Quietly, knowingly. I told myself I was imagining it. That it didn't mean anything. But deep down I knew. Something wasn't right. And soon, I'd find out just how expendable I really was. It started with the little things. You always tell yourself that the little things don't matter, that maybe you're just being paranoid. But paranoia doesn't make your boss suddenly stop copying you on project emails you used to lead. It doesn't explain whispered conversations ending the moment you walk into a room. At first, I told myself Marcus was just busy. He'd been acting tense lately, snapping at people, retreating behind his glass office walls. Still, when I'd knock on his door, he'd force a smile, too wide, too fast, and say, "Everything's fine, Ethan. Just corporate nonsense." But fine had never sounded so fake. Then came Dana, the new strategist. She was sharp, ambitious, maybe too much. I'd catch her using my reports in meetings, the same slides I'd designed, except with her name at the bottom. She'd flash that polished smile when I noticed, like she was daring me to say something. One Thursday, Marcus called an impromptu meeting to discuss the quarterly review. Normally, I'd be the one presenting the data. But when I walked in, my seat at the table was taken by Dana. My name wasn't even on the agenda. "Hey, Marcus," I said quietly, showing him the printout. I thought I was handling Q2. He didn't even look up. "Yeah, about that. Dana's taking lead this round. I want you to focus on back-end analysis instead." Back-end analysis. That was intern work. I opened my mouth to protest, but the look he gave me, cool, warning, detached, made the words die in my throat. "Sure," I said, pretending it didn't sting. When the meeting ended, I lingered just long enough to see Marcus lean close to Dana, murmuring something that made her smirk. She reached out, touched his arm briefly, and his expression softened, something I'd never seen before. That night, I stayed late again, finishing reports no one would read. The office was quiet, humming with the low buzz of the servers. My inbox pinged, a forwarded thread between Marcus and Dana. I shouldn't have opened it, but I did. It was about me. He's asking too many questions, Dana wrote. Handle it, Marcus replied. My stomach dropped. When I confronted him the next morning, he brushed it off. Ethan, don't twist things. You're overthinking again. You know how rumors start. I wanted to believe him. God, I needed to. But that night, the cleaning crew found a shredded document in Marcus's trash bin. Half my name still visible on it. And for the first time in 3 years, I walked out of Vector Point feeling like I didn't belong there anymore. Still, I told myself there had to be an explanation. There always is. Right. You never forget the exact moment your world cracks. For me, it was a rainy Tuesday morning. One of those gray Seattle days where the sky feels too heavy to look at. I was halfway through my third coffee when an internal memo hit my inbox. The subject line made my heart stop. Confidential. Corporate restructure announcement. Effective immediately. I opened it. My name wasn't anywhere on the new org chart. My position? Eliminated. And right there, under Department Reallocation, was Dana's name, listed as Head of Strategic Analysis. My job. My projects. My life's work. I felt the room tilt. 30 minutes later, Marcus called me into his office. The blinds were drawn. He didn't even look up when I stepped in, just motioned for me to sit, like I was some stranger there to waste his time. Ethan, he started, voice cool and rehearsed. Corporate made some tough calls. You've been invaluable, but the company's pivoting. It's not personal. Not personal. I stared at the man who once toasted me at his wedding, who'd promised, "We rise together." You handed her my projects, I said quietly. The ones I built from scratch. He sighed. You're too emotional. It's business. Then he smiled, that same polished, soulless smile I used to admire, and added, You'll land on your feet. People like you always do. People like me. That's when I saw it. The folder on his desk. My reports. My analysis models. My prototype. The one I'd been developing for months to automate VectorPoint's client forecasting system. A tool that could save millions in wasted contracts. And now, it had Dana's name on it. Marcus, I whispered, throat tightening. You stole it. He met my eyes without flinching. Correction. VectorPoint owns it. You just contributed. In that moment, something inside me broke. All those nights, all those sacrifices, they weren't loyalty. They were leverage. I walked out without another word, rain soaking through my coat as I hit the parking lot. My hands were trembling, my mind spinning. Every email, every late-night file share, every mentorship meeting, all of it had been a setup. I'd built the foundation for their next multimillion-dollar deal. And now, I was just a loose end. That night, I sat in my dark apartment, the city lights blurring through my window. My laptop sat open on the table. An empty email draft stared back at me. For the first time in weeks, my pulse slowed. I wasn't going to beg for my job back. I was going to send an email, one that would cost them everything. For 3 days, I didn't move. My apartment looked like a crime scene of broken coffee mugs and empty takeout boxes. The blinds were drawn, laptop shut, voicemail full of sorry to hear about the layoff messages from coworkers too afraid to say more. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Marcus's smirk. Heard that single word echo in my head. Expendable. That's what I'd become. Disposable. Replaceable. Forgotten. The company that took my loyalty, my time, my soul, had erased me with one memo. On the 4th day, I opened my laptop. Not out of hope. Out of habit. My inbox was a graveyard of unread junk, but one subject line caught my eye. Autosync complete. Project Orbital V Final. My pulse quickened. Project Orbital. That was the code name for my prototype, the one they'd stolen. I clicked it, half out of masochism, half out of instinct. The file loaded. Inside was the system I'd built from nothing. Data models, predictive code, client acquisition strategy, the entire architecture of the $60 million deal Marcus and Dana were presenting next month. My name had been scrubbed from every line of metadata. Except one. Buried deep in the code was a note I'd left months ago, a stupid personal tag I'd used to mark my original version. #EC_init. My initials. Proof it was mine. And just like that, something inside me shifted. It wasn't rage this time. It was clarity. Cold. Precise. Electric. I scrolled through the code again, every line now a weapon. Marcus thought he'd taken everything, but he'd underestimated the one thing he couldn't control: my knowledge. I knew every flaw in that system, every weak point. And if they tried to deploy it without me, I could make it all unravel. That's when I heard his voice again. Faint, remembered. Don't take it personally, Ethan. It's just business. Business. That was the trigger. The moment the victim in me died. If it was business, then I'd handle it like business. Ruthless. Strategic. Surgical. I started making calls, to old contacts, to clients I'd helped secure, to one particular journalist who'd been chasing corporate corruption stories for years. I didn't give details yet. Just set the stage. Then I opened a new document titled Operation Retaliate. Every keystroke felt like oxygen. My body still ached, my eyes burned from sleepless nights, but for the first time since this began, I felt alive. They thought they'd buried me. They had no idea I was learning how to dig. And I made myself a promise that night, staring at the glow of the screen. I won't stop until they feel everything they did to me, times 10. I turned my grief into paperwork. Revenge, I learned, likes to be organized. It doesn't roar, it files, it timestamps, it waits. I cataloged every scrap that pointed back to Project Orbital. Old drafts, version histories, that #EC_init tag buried in the code, emails I'd saved to my personal drive, timestamps that showed when I'd first conceived each module. I printed things. I encrypted them. I put physical copies in a safety deposit box. Marcus could scrub the server, but he couldn't clean paper and memory sticks out of existence without looking obvious. I reached out to people I'd helped over the years. The junior engineer whose promotion I'd quietly championed, an ex-client who'd sworn I'd saved their account, a burnout IT admin who still had access to logs tucked away from the corporate glare. None of them asked for money. They wanted fairness. They wanted to see people like Marcus stopped. We agreed on roles. The IT admin would pull archived headers and metadata. The ex-client would corroborate that my forecasting model had already closed deals. The junior engineer would attest that the algorithms were mine. Facts alone don't topple empires. A story does. I wrote a timeline that mapped my work to the company's decisions and, crucially, to a contract Dana had signed with a major client. One that depended on the exact forecasts my system produced. If that contract collapsed, the firm stood to lose not just reputational capital but a multi-year revenue stream. 60 million, I calculated coldly, was within reach if the contract unraveled and regulatory scrutiny followed. I didn't want to expose for spectacle. I wanted a legal, undeniable ripple. So instead of a bombastic public blast, we prepared a measured release. A dossier for a journalist known for clean, unassailable reporting, and a parallel submission to an outside auditor and a whistleblower attorney. That way, the facts would land where they could be verified, investigated, and acted upon, not dismissed as hearsay. Marcus still believed he was untouchable. He'd bragged often enough to the wrong ears. I fed a few casual comments, overheard ambiguous, about risk in the orbital projections, to a select few in the company until anxiety took root. Panic is a multiplier. When the scared start to look, they trip over things you already left in plain sight. Every night I refined the dossier. Every day I checked that the people I'd trusted were still in place. I practiced a calm I'd never had at Vector Point. Measured emails, precise language, no theatrics. Marcus continued to flaunt his victories in public, completely unaware the scaffolding around his prize was quietly being dismantled. The plan was not a single act of anger. It was a machine, patient, bureaucratic, legal, one that would use the company's own rules against it. On the morning we finally sent the dossier onward, one encrypted packet to a reporter, one sealed delivery to an auditor, I felt something I hadn't expected, a hush, like the world holding its breath. Something big was about to explode. We'd set the dominoes so quietly they didn't even know the room had changed. Then, all at once, they fell. The morning the dossier hit the reporter's inbox, VectorPoint's PR team was blindsided. The story landed on the paper's front page by lunchtime. Internal emails reveal systemic misattribution, risk to $60 million client contract. The headline was clinical. The subhead was not. It named Marcus Hale and Dana Pierce, and it quoted the exact internal thread I'd forwarded, an email where Marcus instructed Dana to remove my authorship and fast-track the presentation to the client, followed by Dana's message arranging client-side meetings with doctored forecast slides. The hashtag EC_NIT tag I'd left in the code was reproduced in the article's screenshots. No one could dismiss it as rumor. Within 48 hours, the auditor we'd contacted opened a formal inquiry. They came with subpoenas, not questions. The client, the one who'd signed the multi-year high-value contract based on Orbital's predictions, suspended payments and issued a force majeure notification when their first quarterly deliverables missed targets by millions. Legal teams circled like sharks. The board convened an emergency meeting. Marcus paced the room in the same suit he'd worn when he'd promised my future. He tried the rehearsed lines, oversight, transition, miscommunication, but the auditor's email headers and server logs had a clarity he couldn't buy with charm. Metadata proved the timestamps, the earliest commits, the initial proposals, the archived emails, they all traced back to me. Not only had they taken my work, they'd knowingly presented inflated projections to secure a risky contract. Greed, the auditors concluded, had trumped competence. Share prices dipped. The client filed for damages. Investors demanded heads. Marcus's resignation was a quiet press release that read like a eulogy. Dana's stock options were frozen. Her professional endorsements evaporated. The regulatory notice that followed cited negligent misrepresentation and opened the door to criminal inquiry. The $60 million wasn't a rounded number in a spreadsheet anymore. It was a physical weight dragging the company's balance sheet, and their reputations, underwater. The public spectacle was worse than I imagined. Marcus's dismissal was not a dignified exit. He stood at the podium on live television, voice breaking as he mouthed contrition, while news anchors passed every sentence for culpability. Callers left voicemails on his office line. Accusations, curses, the kind of raw, personal things people say when they've been burned. He had no one to meet him on the curb when he left the building. No handshake. No escort. Just the echo of his own footsteps in the marble lobby. I watched it all from a corner table in a crowded cafe, the paper folded between my hands like a talisman. The roar of my old anger had drained away, replaced by an odd, quiet stillness. The payoff was absolute, and yet, in that silence, the victory felt smaller than I'd imagined. I'd taken their empire down, but the cost had been something I couldn't name. Time, trust, years of nights that couldn't be returned. Outside, the rain started up again, soft and indifferent. Marcus's face appeared on the TV screen one last time, smaller now, receding into a blur. I closed the paper, folded my hands, and for the first time since it began, I let the silence settle over me. Justice had a price, and they'd just paid it. They say revenge doesn't fix anything. Maybe they're right. But standing on the other side of it, I can tell you this, it balances things. 3 months after the fallout, VectorPoint Systems was a shell of itself. Half the board resigned. The client lawsuits piled up until the company's name became shorthand for corporate fraud in every business ethics lecture across the country. And Marcus Hale? He disappeared from LinkedIn first. Then the news feeds. Last I heard, he'd sold his house in Bellevue and moved somewhere quiet, away from the headlines. There were rumors, drinking, divorce, depression, but I didn't chase them. I didn't need to. He'd lost the only thing he ever really worshipped: control. Dana wasn't far behind. She tried to pivot into consulting, But every background check led back to the same article, the same audit, the same lies. Her name had become radioactive. I didn't gloat. Not because I'd found grace, but because I'd already spent everything worth gloating with. For weeks, I'd wake up expecting to feel the same rage, the same hollow ache. But what replaced it was quieter, like a lake after a storm. I went back to basics. Freelance projects, small clients, no boardrooms. I slept better, worked slower, built things that belonged entirely to me this time. One night, while cleaning out my old folders, I found the original orbital prototype, the untouched version, the one before Vectorpoint branded it. I stared at the code for a long time. It wasn't just data anymore. It was a time capsule. Every line of it written by the man I used to be. The believer. I smiled. Then I deleted it. Because I didn't need it anymore. Revenge had started as a way to prove my worth, but somewhere along the way, I realized it had already done that. I didn't need a promotion or a title to validate what I'd built. I'd exposed a truth that money couldn't bury. The expendable one was never me, it was them. People like Marcus build empires on loyalty they never intend to return. And when those empires fall, they don't crash with noise, they collapse in silence, one quiet truth at a time. I walked to the window. Seattle's skyline glowed against the dark, new towers rising, old ones fading into shadow. For the first time in years, I didn't feel small beneath it. They called me expendable, I whispered to the glass, my reflection staring back. Turns out, I was the one thing they couldn't replace. Have you ever been betrayed by someone you trusted, a boss, a friend, a partner, and wondered what justice would look like if the truth finally came out? Share your story in the comments. I read every single one. And if you want to hear more real stories of revenge, redemption, and the price of loyalty, subscribe. Because this isn't the end, it's just the next beginning.